Welcome to this Killick Explains video, and this time I want to take on, believe it or not, a Dutch saying, clogs to clogs in 3 generations. And I want to just remind you why that saying can be relevant to a typical family even in 2024. It's an old saying, but it's relevant to the modern world. Now, what they're trying to describe with this clogs to clogs in 3 generations idea is a typical family's wealth trajectory. So I'll explain that, and then I'll also explain what you can do to counter this cliche potentially affecting intergenerational wealth transfer. So what are the 3 generations, if you like? If it's clogs to clogs in 3 generations, or from clogs back to clogs in 3 generations, how does that work? Well, generation 1 is what I call the makers. Generation 1 might be an entrepreneur, and I'm thinking of people I know here who've built their own wealth, often from scratch, all right? They may come from relatively humble origins, particularly in the Dutch, we're thinking of this expression. They have, out of necessity, had to work hard. They've got a saving mindset. They're thrifty, all right? They put all the money they generate back into the business, okay? They've got an eye on the future. They're constantly worried about running out of money. They're constantly worried about going back to where they started. So these are people, actually, when it comes to later life, who may struggle to actually start spending the money that they've earned. But the good news, if you're in the next generation, is you'll probably benefit from precisely that mindset. Because generation 2 tend to be the children of generation 1, and they're what I call the keepers. Now, they will have had opportunities that their parents didn't, typically, okay? For example, they'll be better educated, all right? They will have more opportunities, potentially, to enjoy and see the world. They will take advice from their parents, generation 1, and their mindset is often, now clearly this is a generalization, to, at worst, preserve the wealth the family has built up, because they can see how hard their parents worked. They're influenced by their parents. All right. So if anything, if they join, the professional classes, for example, become lawyers, accountants, doctors, whatever it might be, they may even add to the wealth that potentially they're going to inherit from the family in the form of that, entrepreneurial spirit that built a business or basically lifted the family out of relative poverty. And it's that sort of gratitude for what their parents did that makes them the keepers. Not in all cases, but in a lot of cases. Then you get generation 3. Now, I'm not saying this is the case all the time. This is where you get clogs back to clogs in 3 generations, the spenders. Now, this isn't entirely their fault. These are the grandchildren of generation 1 and the children of generation 2. They are born into relative wealth, all right? Granny and granddad built it. Their parents then preserved it. Good professional jobs, typically, let's say. So they have high expectations. They might be spoiled, all right? They might expect to inherit quite a lot of money. They might be told they're going to inherit lots of money because the previous generations have done the right things. They believe in the magic money tree, all right? Yeah, money's not a problem for them. They don't see how it was built in the first place. They're not connected to the original story. There's a generation separating them called their parents, if you like. And this is the danger, that through no fault of their own, and entrepreneurs do worry about this all the time, Generation 3 will have no concept of where money comes from, no concept of how you earn it, and are at risk, therefore, of simply becoming the spending generation. And it is a cliche for a reason, because there are plenty of examples where Generation 3 has actually annihilated the family's entire wealth, having inherited it, through a mixture of poor decisions, poor marriages, poor business opportunities, or simply spending it with no concept of how to make it. So what can we do about it? This all sounds a bit depressing. Well, I don't want to be too depressing about it, but there are steps that families can take to head off the clogs to clogs cliche. I'll just give you 3 ideas and then some further places to look. 1 is education. I know I would say that, but it's really important that generations 2 and 3 in particular understand money, understand finances, understand intergenerational wealth transfer. For that to work, you need communication. All right, you need these generations to talk to each other. You need them to get round a table from time to time, discuss all right, how they're going to plan for the future. If grandparents want to pay for education for grandchildren, those grandchildren at a certain point need to be brought in to the conversation to understand how that was all built and paid for. And of course, financial protection. There are ways, for example, that grandparents who quite rightly may have built wealth, they want to help grandchildren, for argument's sake, want to help with education, and heaven knows that's getting more and more expensive. So there are trusts, for example, there are ways potentially to ring fence wealth such that it doesn't necessarily fall into the hands, if I can put it that way, of grandchildren straight away. For example, you can set minimum ages. I've seen trusts not release substantial amounts of money beyond sort of health and education, the age of 25, the age of 30, even 40. The concept being that the kids will be a little bit more responsible by the time the money comes into their hands. So there you have it. Clogs to clogs in 3 generations, not a guaranteed route, but it is a cliche for a good reason. Now, I said there's more information available on all of the topics I've just mentioned. So killick.com/resources has got more Killick Explains videos, my how-to guides, and there are various ones with different cover colors, and of course our quarterly flagship magazine, Confidant.